topic, which is gender equality in business during and after the pandemic. As a bilateral chamber of commerce, we attach special importance to the social gender equality, equal participation of women to the business life, and equality in terms of all our implementations as from our establishment. When we decided to organize this seminar, I wanted to check articles of the constitutions of Luxembourg related to this topic and found out that Article 11 of the Constitution of Luxembourg guarantees gender equality. Women and men are equal in rights and duties. In Luxembourg, gender mainstreaming is strongly embedded in policy so as to ensure the promotion of gender equality. In fostering gender equality and gender mainstreaming, Luxembourg has closely followed United Nations and European instruments, European Union instruments, policies, and legislation. Before I give the floor to Her Excellency, I would like to make a special announcement of the latest scholarship projects that we have initiated. We want to support young women students who want to pursue their higher education in Belgium or in Luxembourg, and to help them to find scholarship for their higher education in these two countries. We aim for our scholars to research the policies and tools applied to strengthen the position of women in business life and increase their importance in the countries they study. We also intend to transfer this experience and practical knowledge of our scholars to Turkey when they come back and to contribute to our country in these matters. We believe that it's critically important. In line with this goal, we look forward to the support of the companies and individuals from Turkey, from Belgium, and Luxembourg, and of course, every volunteer without any restrictions. You can serve this good purpose by providing scholarship support to students who want to pursue their higher education. For more details, please do not hesitate to get in touch with our administrative assistant, Mrs. Ayşe Aylin. Now, Her Excellency, I would like to give you the floor for your opening remarks. Thank you.
Good night and good morning. Bonjour, moyen, from Ankara, because we are all in different cities or countries. It's a pleasure to be here, and first of all, I would like to thank Mr. Apaydin for the kind and his team for the kind invitation and for having me to this morning here participating in this webinar, where I can, which gives me the opportunity to share with you some key information regarding gender equality and policy on gender equality in Luxembourg. I will focus on gender equality in Luxembourg more in general terms, and then saying some word on gender equality in investment, and tell you a bit about the various initiatives which exist in Luxembourg in order to promote female entrepreneurship. First of all, regarding gender equality in Luxembourg, Luxembourg aims to create a society with no gender stereotypes. It is firmly committed to the promotion of gender equality in all areas of life. When forming the new government following the election in 1995, Luxembourg created for the first time a ministry for the advancement of women, Ministère de la Promotion Féminine, and it has been renamed various times. Now, following the last elections in 2015, it has been renamed Ministry of Equality between Women and Men. To date, we are very proud because Luxembourg is the only EU state with a ministry whose responsibility is exclusively dedicated to gender equality. As already mentioned by Mr. Apaydin, Article 11 of our Constitution guarantees gender equality. Women are equal in rights and duties. We last month or 3 weeks ago, it was the International Day on Women's International Day on 8th of March, and it's always a momentum in the year where there are a lot of studies and surveys are presented. And one of the study which was presented during that period is the EU Gender Equality Index, and where Luxembourg ranks 10th among the 27 EU member states, and we score 70.3 points out of 100. We are slightly above the EU average, which was 67.9. And this shows that Luxembourg is progressing towards gender equality at a faster pace as other EU member states. Well, this does not mean we still have a very long way. And we still face a lot of challenges, like in other European countries, including here in Turkey. We took some. Let me tell you, we took some measures. For example, some legislation. In 2016, this was a very important step, because in 2016, Luxembourg adopted a law on equal pay, aiming to ensure the principle equal pay for equal work. So when setting a salary, the employer can only use as criteria knowledge, experience, and responsibility. And we could see that this legislation had a positive impact, because in the last survey comparing pay gap, the gender pay gap, which was published in February 2021, it shows that the average gender pay gap in the EU was 14.1%. That's the average in the EU, and it refers to the year 2019. So the average gender pay gap was 14.1. The highest gender pay gap, unfortunately, was 21.7, and the lowest was 1.3%, and the lowest gender pay gap was in Luxembourg. So we are very happy and satisfied that this law brought concrete results in almost closing the gender pay gap. Overall, equality between men and women in education, economic decision-making, and political power, and women's economic independence and equal earning potential are key for Luxembourg's future. There are several common challenges regarding gender equality. We mentioned the gender pay gap. We have the work-life balance, which is a factor that affects predominantly women and might prevent them to pursuing a professional career. And then some studies show that women might be perceived, for whatever reason, as less competent. There are studies showing this, bit amazed, and for others, for various reasons, maybe less reliable, comparing to employing men. I don't want to dwell on the COVID effects on the gender equality, because I expect the next speakers to do so. So let me just tell you some words regarding gender equality in investment. Well, even if there's evidence that gender diverse teams produce better results, women still remain underrepresented when it comes to investment, both as beneficiaries and as decision makers. There are certain evidence that there's women's wealth is on the rise, and women tend to invest more in long-term and impactful projects. Unfortunately, while women represent more than half of the EU population or the world's population, we are half of the world's population, and in the EU context, women create roughly only a third of companies. Female entrepreneurs have more difficulties than men in raising finance for their ventures. So why is it more difficult for women to raise money? There are several reasons for this funding gap for female entrepreneurs. In the first place, it seems that women are less likely to be entrepreneurs than men. The differences is often attributed to different levels of human capital. Apparently, women are perceive themselves as having less entrepreneurial experience than men. There's a question of social capital. Maybe they have a smaller and less diverse network. It's a question of growth aspiration, funding connections, and there's the issue of family policies, which I briefly mentioned before, the work-life balance. And then another reason seems to be that women are less likely than men to ask for external financing, and so they just don't apply. And they might be more risk averse as well. They wouldn't apply as easily for funding and for a loan. Now, I would like to finish saying some words about the initiatives that initiatives which exist in Luxembourg to promote female entrepreneurship. We have there. I would like to highlight 4 of them. There are the Female Entrepreneur Task Force, which is an initiative launched by the Luxembourg Ministry of Economy to foster and empower female entrepreneurship pool in Luxembourg. It provides potential female investors with appropriate tools to invest in startups. And this is a concrete example of gender mainstreaming, because this is an initiative which comes from the Ministry of Economy. So we try to mainstream and to have specific policies in various ministries. In this case, it's the Ministry of Finance, and not only in the ministry in charge of equality between men and women. Then the second initiative is the Female Entrepreneurship Ambassadors Luxembourg, which is a network of experienced, successful female business managers. They campaign to encourage other women, particularly those starting out in their careers or seeking a career change, to set up their own businesses. We have business angels as well. So it's a next network, a cluster of successful business women mentoring and supporting new ones. Then we have the Fédération des femmes chefs d'entreprise du Luxembourg, and this was established a long time ago by the Ministry of Equality, which aims to encourage women's role in entrepreneurship and their involvement in decision-making in the private sector. And finally, we have Women in Digital Environment, which seeks to empower women with and thanks to digital, as well as to increase the number of women seizing their opportunities in the digital economy, in the digital society. Those are the information I wanted to share with the audience and the rest of the panel. I would like again to thank you very much for the kind invitation and giving me the opportunity to present what Luxembourg does in order to promote gender equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ambassador, for these opening remarks. And now we will continue with the Associate Professor at Istanbul Technical University Management Faculty, Ms. Ayşe Aylin Bayar. Ms. Bayar, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much again for your kind invitation for this panel. I think I am the only one who shared a presentation. Please let me share in order to show our study, let me share my presentation at first, then I'll go on. Okay. Okay, is everything clear for you before I start?
Yes, it is clear. Thank you.
Okay. Today I try to talk about the women domestic and professional engagement for Turkey, and I want to share some figures and numbers from Turkish case, and in order to make a comparison between the pre-pandemic conditions for women and the conditions for during the pandemic and after the pandemic. Actually, we are not after the pandemic, but maybe our results will give you a clue about what was going on the women perspective for Turkey. As we all know, we face with an unexpected global health crisis in our lifetime, but it's not only a health crisis. Actually, it caused one of a big global crisis for all of the world, actually, this is because of the substantial slowdown on activities in sectors such as transportation, wholesale, retail trade, and tourism. And with these contractions in the economy, all the countries, including EU and the United States, face with an economic recession. And for Turkey, World Bank can estimate a fall in the total income for Turkey, but actually at the end of the 2020, we achieve a positive, maybe a small one, but a positive number of growth. But actually, it's very important for us if it is inclusive or not, because not only achieving a positive number for the growth is not actually enough for the individuals, because if you can't distribute the total income equally to the vulnerable groups because of their job, it's not good for, maybe it's good for the overall economy, but it's not good for the individuals who live in. And as far as I know, all the studies actually assume pandemic equally impact on the individuals, but we all know that vulnerable groups like women or elder or youth actually affected much more from the rest of the population. That's why in our study, we only focus on the women and the women position in the labor market. Before the pandemic, Turkey was already a challenged economy. Actually, it has some distributional problems. We have a high income inequality and poverty, and our labor force, our labor market health status is actually not in a good position. We have a very low labor force participation rate. It's around 45%, and it's actually for women, women labor force participation rate is actually one of the lowest one in globally. It's around 32, and when you look at the employment rate, it's much more lower. It's 27%. By the way, all the numbers that I'll mention in this presentation are taken from the Turkish Statistical Institution, the income survey of income and income and living conditions survey actually. These are the real numbers for Turkey, and we have a high and increasing unemployment rate, and actually this is much more severe for the women, and we have a low growth rate, and then the pandemic hits all the countries in the world. And actually my main focus on this presentation on the women, because we all know that they are the vulnerable group, and for Turkish case actually they are more vulnerable, because we in Turkey women has a domestic burden in the household, and the labor force participation or the labor force attachment of the women actually affected from this domestic burden, because we this is because mainly due to their role attributed in the society in Turkey. They have to look after their children, they have some care responsibilities in the house, and that's why their labor force attachment is much more lower than the other countries. And with the pandemic, beyond it's a health crisis, but beyond the health crisis, the pandemic also bring a care crisis for Turkey, because it increased the demand for care services, and this increase in the demand not only affect the formal health care services, it actually affect the household produce care services, include childcare, elderly care, ill care, even elder people with healthy elder people need much more care during the pandemic. And this is why, sorry about it, this is why we believe that women face with an much more burden than the men when we think of the care responsibilities, whether they are in employment or not. There is a huge difference in the care responsibilities between men and women. And actually, before the pandemic, when we look at the economic status of women, we can say that in Turkey, half of the women are fulfilling their care responsibilities and housework. What does it mean? It means they are out of labor force. Because of the care services or care responsibilities, and the employment rate before the pandemic is only around 26%. And when we ask women why they are not want to work, or why they are not seek for a job for themselves, they mainly give a reason like this: because of our care responsibilities. We have to look after our child or our elder, and when we look at the wage level for women in the labor market, there's a gender discrimination, and that's why as when we compare their human capital and the wage level that they face, we call in economics like a reservation rate, it's much more lower than the care services that they have to pay for their children. And that's why they mainly stay at home and they look after their children or their elder. And this is why even they graduate from university or even they graduate from high school, they prefer to stay at home in Turkey because of the huge, this is mainly at the urban places, actually at the urban, this is the case, they mainly prefer to stay at home instead of working, and that's why they are not seeking for a job even before the pandemic conditions. And when they work, we can observe that they are mainly unpaid family workers. Only 27% of women are working. They are mainly in at the unpaid family worker, and they also work as a wage earner. But when we compare the men and the women, there's a huge gap between the men and women employment status when we compare them. And when we ask why they prefer to work as a casual employee, or why they prefer to work less than 30 hours, they again answer that question as because of their housework and because of the care services they have to do. And that's why actually before the pandemic, that's why we face with that kind of lower labor force participation rate for the women, and they mainly work in agricultural sector in Turkey. And aside from the agricultural sector, they work as at the human health and social work activities and the education sector. And when we compare their earnings, human earnings and the men earnings, I can say that for the wage earners, women get 15% less wage than the men. When we look at the entrepreneur earning in Turkey, women get 60% less than the men. There's a huge gap between men and women when they attach in the labor market. I think this is a good clue about the gender discrimination for Turkey. There are so many studies about the gender discrimination wage gap between the men and women, but in this presentation, I only want to focus on the effect of COVID-19 on the women employment and the income level. And as we all know, pandemic triggers negative shock on the overall economy and the employment, but some sectors are most likely to be hit harder than the others. And in that sense, we can divide the overall economic activities depending on their exposition to negative shocks. We know the critical sectors, they are not adversely affected from the COVID-19. These are health and education, and mostly women are work in these sectors in Turkey. They are essential workers, but their workloads increase in these times, and there is a deterioration in their work condition, but they are not actually adversely affected from the COVID-19. Most affected sectors are transport, tourism, accommodation, food services, wholesale, and retail trade. There are severe contractions in terms of employment, and we also have less affected sectors like manufacturing, particularly in textile, and maybe we can add the construction sector in here as well, but we don't face a high contraction in these sectors, but we can say that there is a contraction in these sectors as well. Now let's look at how the recession the economic contraction affect the women and men employment. Let's look at this one. The left part of this slide gives us a clue about which one affected more from the COVID-19. Very bad means there is a severe economic contraction in the sectors, and bad also means a contraction in the sectors. And when we look at this figure, we can understand that there is a relatively weaker direct employment impact on women. This is mainly because of a very limited number of women are in the employment, and they are mainly attached in the labor market as at the human health and education services, and that's why they are not directly affected from the COVID-19. But as we all know, for Turkey, yes, we know there is a limited direct effect of employment and income for the employed women, but in Turkey, we know that there are independent women. What do I mean by independent women? They are more likely less educated than the men, and they are not employed, and mainly they are graduated from primary school, or they never went to a school, and nearly most of them are married, and they live in the larger households, and they are not the income earners. They depend to somebody else in the household. That's why we call them as a dependent woman. And when we look at the male breadwinner households, we can understand that because of the economic contraction of the COVID-19, mostly males are directly affected from or face job loss because of the COVID-19, and that's why we can say that they are indirectly affected from COVID-19. They face the recession because of their husband, fathers, sons, or brothers who become unemployed or suffer from falling labor earnings. Normally, in other economic crises in Turkey, when husbands or fathers lost their job, women mainly attached to labor market. They find temporary or they find a job in the informal sector. But this time, contraction is very severe. And as they are not educated, they can't find, because of the lockdowns and the quarantines, they can't find a job for themselves, and that's we call it as actually a normally added worker effect. If a woman can find a temporary job, and if they can survive, or if they can save the day, we can say that they cause an added worker effect. But this time they can find a job themselves as well, and this is why the severeness or the severity of the COVID-19 on the dependent women is very large when we compare it with the other economic crisis that Turkey experienced in the last decades. Another important point for the women actually is coming because of the poor households. When we look at the poor households with a gender perspective, we can say that at first, maybe it's good to describe what is poor. Actually, we define poor as an individuals who live under a specific income level, and we take the half of the median income of the household as a poverty line, and we look just focus on the poor who live behind the specific poverty line. And when we look at the women and the women's situation in these poor households, we can say that 85% of the women are out of labor market, and 64 of them fulfilling domestic tasks at home. They are housewives, and they are responsible for the care services in the household. And only 15% of men at 15% of women at work. There are only 15% of them are employed, and half of the 15% are again unpaid family worker. Maybe they are not directly affected from the COVID-19, but these numbers actually, I believe, explicitly reveal how women are vulnerable to external shocks because of their dependency on the others' income in the household. When we look at the poor households sectoral distribution, actually these are not the distribution of only the women's distribution. The numbers at the right part gives us the income sources of male breadwinner in the poor households, and half of the poor households with the dependent women negatively affected from COVID-19. When we look at the numbers, it nearly 500 million individuals for Turkey. And actually, these numbers are huge because because of the low labor force participation of women, they are not COVID-19 not directly affect them, but because of their role that is attributed from the society, and because they are mostly a housewife, as a result of they are because of housewife, and as they are dependent, we can say that a huge number of women are affected from these economic contraction. We face with a, before the pandemic condition, we face with a very low and actually low participation rate over the long run, and there we face with a gender gap in the labor force participation rate, and as a result of lack of high quality health, child and elder care services, and the low wage level for the women, the women's labor market attachment is very low. And Turkey responds with several policies to this COVID-19, and they make cash transfers, and they declare about dissolving labor contracts are prohibited at first for 3 months, then it's extended until yesterday, and they release workers without payment was allowed for the actually employers, but government in return pay a short-term working allowance to the workers, but this amount of payment, short-term working allowance, is not enough to survive these households, and that's why, because mainly women or the men who live in the poor households or who are not attached as a wage earners, because of the biggest problem is coming from these groups, because they are a casual employee, and as they are unpaid family workers, and mostly they are work in informal sectors, they are not included in these short-term payment. And that's why our suggestion for these vulnerable group is a direct income transfer. And actually the financial burden for the government is not much when we look at the numbers, because if we want to, we don't want to make all of the individuals to be above the income poverty line. We just want to pay some of the poor households or some of the men or women who are in the informal sector to a direct income transfer. If we pay some amount of money to them, actually it makes only 2 million people for whole Turkey. And when we make a simple method, actually we mentioned in our study much more extensively, but I want to keep short. That's why I try to talk as fast as I can. It only costs 3 billion, or nearly we can say 4 billion Turkish liras for the government, that kind of income transfer. It can affordable for the, I think, government, or maybe it's another discussion point for another panel, but there is a term as a universal basic income. It's a social security theory. Maybe you heard this term before. State provides a regular income to all students, regardless whether they earn income or wealth. Just because the member of society, a state provides a regular income to all citizens, and that can protect the vulnerable ones much more than the employed ones. And this is actually one of the important points for Turkey. And I think this is all I want to share with you. Thank you for listening. I want to be fast as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bayar, this very informative presentation. And now we will continue with the President of Women Entrepreneur Association of Turkey, Ms. Emine Erdem. Ms. Erdem, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Ayşe. Her Excellency Angèle de Cruz, dear distinguished participants and valuable speakers, good morning, everybody. I would like to thank Belgium Luxembourg Chamber of Commerce in Turkey and Embassy of Luxembourg for the invitation, and also addressing gender equality during and after pandemic. I hope all of you, your families, and your beloved ones are all safe and healthy. Since the beginning of 2020, the world has been passing through really hard times. We know that the pandemic has deepened pre-existing inequalities, the difficulties experienced by many women across the country in combining working from home with care responsibilities. Informal workers, low-income families, and youth are under particular pressure. Women who are at the center of paid and unpaid care work are affected more and hit harder by the crisis. A recently released report shows that the pandemic will push 96 million people into extreme poverty in 2021, and 47 million of whom are women and girls. And we know that women are losing their jobs. The pandemic and measures to prevent its spread are driving a disproportionate increase in women's unemployment as compared to men, and also decreasing their overall working time. TÜİK labor force statistics announced in February shows that women's participation to labor force has dropped from 29% to 26%. From the economic perspective, it is crucial to create support for women workers by implementing gender-responsive social protection systems to support income security for women. Reconciliation of paid and unpaid work by providing all primary caregivers with paid leave and reduced or flexible working arrangements should be a priority. Access to affordable and quality childcare services will enable more women to be in the labor force. Bridging the gender pay gap is really urgent. Closing gender inequality gaps grabs huge economic benefits. Studies demonstrate that improvements to women's equality can create up to 10.5 million new jobs by 2050, of which 70% will be occupied by women. Our interaction with digitalization has shifted into a faster track for many of us. Popular telework and ICT-based mobile work have been identified as tools helping to improve the work-life balance of employees, but it also has disadvantages. The effect of flexible working hours for men and women, right to disconnect, and ownership on digital well-being should be discussed and protected. While we are welcoming to benefits of digitalization, we also need to focus on and ensure that women and girls are included in learning and skills development programs during and after the crisis, while we focus on understanding and working on how far digital tools are accessible to grassroots women and girls in rural areas and in the countryside. The European Institute of Gender Equality has launched the 2020 Gender Equality Index, which revealed that it will take another 60 years to achieve equality if we continue at the same pace. With the impact of COVID-19, there can only be a further setback given the surge of male violence against women, increased rates of women's unemployment, heightened risks of poverty, and over the dependence of on women's paid and also unpaid care work. Women organizations have been pointing many recommendations on women's empowerment and importance of women's participation to decision making. With COVID-19, we once again cried out that women's visibility and participation in decision-making processes during crisis are seminal. Due to COVID-19, the political and urgent priorities have shifted. And if the system does not have the reflex of a care-focused system, or if the system lacks on protecting fundamental rights and freedoms, those countries suffered even more. And violence against women and girls is the most serious form of gender-based violation of human rights. And it is an act of discrimination that abridges women's fundamental freedoms, hindering their full participation in the public and private spheres. Fighting against violence is a really fundamental step for gender equality. As KAGİDER, we will work to change the withdrawal decision from Istanbul Convention. KAGİDER's main mission is to support women entrepreneurship, and with the impact of COVID-19, many women business owners face the risk of closing down their businesses. With the results of the latest research we carried out with Ipsos, we see that 37% of the women have closed the year with loss, and 55% of them have ceased their operations. Global parameters show that women tend to own small or medium businesses, and the crisis mostly harmed the SMEs. And women-owned SMEs contribute significantly to the economies in which they operate. Women's entrepreneurship is a driver for economic growth and sustainability. Even before the global pandemic, there were several barriers to women's success in business, such as an enabling environment, including legal and policy considerations, access to information, skills and knowledge, access to markets, access to finance, and also access to networks. Specific COVID-19 response and recovery strategies should be geared towards women entrepreneurs to capture their needs. We need to ensure that women entrepreneurs lead the way in developing and informing response and recovery strategies. As in all gender equality related domains, we need gender disaggregated data and data-driven policies and goals to boost the performance of women entrepreneurs. All sectors and levels of government can work together to support women entrepreneurs and ensure that women are at the forefront of COVID-19 recovery and transformation strategies. State-led social protection for entrepreneurs with family responsibilities is vital. Access to information, skill and knowledge development should be prioritized. Supplier diversity, including through small business and public procurement programs to support women, should be developed. And building resilient and inclusive value chains is integral to advancing women-led small businesses. Investing in financial literacy is key to ensuring that women's business can start and thrive despite economic shocks such as COVID-19. Dear participants, women's empowerment and gender equality is a must for sustainability recovery. And once again, I would like to thank the organizers for the discussion on this crucial topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Emine Erdem, for your participation and this
Very
valuable
welcome.
information. And now we will continue with the member of the BLCCT and the General Manager of the Barry Callebaut Turkey, Neslihan Nigiz Ulak. Ms. Ulak, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ayşe. But the time is almost finishing, so I'm sure many of us might have back-to-back meetings. There is not much time also left for Q&A then. So I suggest that I make a different type of conversation than I prepared. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Dear Ambassador, Excellency, glad to meet you and distinguished guests. Why I want to now make, within the limited time, a different presentation. We heard the situation, what's happening. We are part of it already, as many of us, as far as I see, also the 60% of this webinar is mainly women. We are part of it, we are experiencing it, we are observing it. And as Barry Callebaut, globally, we are a growth company. And during the pandemic, we launched our diversity and inclusion strategy globally, and we called it 1BC. I think it resonates with what's happening around the world. Emine President, Ms. Emine mentioned about the sustainable growth afterwards, the sustainability of women's empowerment and women's participation in the business. According to our Barry Callebaut global strategy, everybody belongs to business life. And in this case, you can translate everybody belongs to Barry Callebaut, or everybody belongs to one of the KAGİDER's firms. So everybody actually have the right to ask for fair and equal treatment for life, but also, of course, for business. And within that context, during this pandemic times, we have put some measures in place and support systems in place, not only in Turkey, but globally, so that, first of all, from the well-being perspective, safety perspective, but also the continuation of women participation in the business world is in place. How? Some of them are soft measures, some of them are hard measures. For example, in Turkey, before pandemics, actually, we started the journey together with our HR director, who is also in the call, Nermin. We looked at our numbers, and even before the D&I global launch, we made, I would say, in brackets, first the analysis, but then the positive discrimination of how we can introduce more women, especially where the woman participation is lower, like in the functions of sales, like in the functions of supply chain, because these are the areas in most of the time women are not, either they do not themselves would like to apply, or if they do apply, then because the culture is not inclusive enough, they prefer to change to, marketing, HR, some other functions where the coin is reversed there, where women participation is much higher. Therefore, we looked at the picture, we looked at our pipeline, and we deliberately put more women resource in the pipeline, especially for sales and supply chain. Overall, I can proudly say, after a 3 years journey as Barry Callebaut Turkey, we are 50-50 at a balance in our leadership team, in the executive board in Turkey. We are also, in terms of total white collar numbers, 60% female and 40% male. But we have a homework on the blue collar side. And on the blue collar side, again, both our Ayşe Hanım and Emine Hanım mentioned about the vulnerable groups. Yeah, there are also, the hardest part to attract women to blue collar, but once you attract, also keep them within that environment and make sure that you support them. For example, our footprint is in Eskişehir. Once we attract women, how we are going to support in that, you know, more rural area within their current pandemic conditions, and how you can make sure that they do not also receive domestic violence. I want to make sure that this is not only for blue collar. There's a new research I just encountered. 75% of the white collar women population also unfortunately is under some type of violence in Turkey, but it's more common on the blue collar side, we know. Therefore, you have to put the necessary support mechanisms in place. To summarize in a nutshell, from a business perspective, from a company perspective, first, as business leaders, we have to make sure the numbers are in balance, the pipeline, the numbers, and then you have to make sure that this is sustainable in terms of sustainable because of an inclusive culture, because of a mentoring mentee programs you put in place. How we do that, for example, there is a association foundation, which I'm proudly was one of the founders, and I'm still at the board, Lead Network Turkey. So during that, within that platform, we also work with KAGİDER, by the way, within that platform where KAGİDER is more with the entrepreneurs, we are more with the CPG industry, yeah, consumer packed foods, FMCG. So retailers like Migros are there, Nestle's, Unilever's, Barry Callebaut's are there. So we combine resources within that ecosystem to make sure that our, especially senior or mid-level executives, female executives, can prosper and develop. We can develop them in terms of leadership skills so they can, you know, move the ladders or climb the ladders in their career journey. Mentoring and mentee program we received from Lead Network Europe, but we also deployed it during pandemic within our own company with a train-the-trainee approach. We also implemented lots of well-being activities, especially during lockdowns, and we are still continuing that, because there I also want to mention to keep the woman workforce in the workforce, especially during these hard times, role models, putting role models on the screen, on the spotlight is extremely important as well. So I myself, for example, I'm a mother of a son, 11 years old, and my husband is a banker. So I'm doing this type of a job. And without the support system, and if you don't ask help, this cannot be doable. I mean, the schools are closed, as you know. It's extremely difficult for parents, but mainly for moms. Therefore, putting role models on the spotlight, making sure that they tell their stories. And then the next step, why KAGİDER is so important as an NGO, why Lead Network is important. Women as females, we are, I would say, I cannot say we don't know, but we are lagging behind in terms of networking versus men. So these platforms also should be used more during pandemics to keep the networking flow going forward. We, for example, within the community, I remember, especially at the start of the pandemics, some of the companies within the Lead Network platform had to unfortunately shake hands with some of the resources because of a HoReCa sector or whatever. But then, for example, Migros was in need of recruitment new people. So we got engaged and we made sure that these companies met each other and try to, you know, take the excess resource from that one to another one, so that women do not lose their jobs, as our professor mentioned. All in all, I'm summarizing. I hope we are only 3 minutes over 12. Putting the right role models, putting the right support systems, and being in the bigger ecosystem with your I would say suppliers, customers, via these kind of NGOs is crucial to make sure that the women in the, I would say, CPG sector, which I'm representing now, continue to develop, continue to prosper, and continue to be in the workplace within and after pandemics. It was a very short presentation, but anybody who is interested can contact afterwards. Thank you, Ayşe.
Thank you, Neslihan Hanım, for this valuable contribution. Now we are running out of time, but we can still take a couple of questions. Dear participants, if you have a questions, you can use the raise a hand buttons, or you can write down on the chat button. And Levent Bey, would you like to add something, some final words?
It is not easy to add something to what has been said, because every single phrase was very, very valuable for me. When I was listening, Her Excellency, the information she shared with us was very valuable, because we have seen how far we need to go in this critical topic. Taking the example of Grand-Duché de Luxembourg. And when I had the chance to see the presentation of the Associate Professor Bayar, although we are living in this community, I have been aware of the hugeness of the problem that we are facing. And President Emine Hanım and Neslihan Hanım as well, they have given us a great perspective, and I proudly can sign under all the speeches that they have given today. If, as Belgian Luxembourg Chamber of Commerce in Turkey, we can be a small part of this chain as a supportive organization, we will be more than happy, and we will be glad to add one piece of salt in this soup. So I hope I could transmit my feelings and my opinion regarding what has been said. Thank you.
Thank you, Levent Bey. I think we don't have a question. All the speeches were very clear. Thank you for all the speakers for their valuable contribution and participation. And now we can end the meeting. Thank you for all the participants for their participation. And have a nice day to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.